Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's my great pleasure and honor to introduce my dear friend and colleague, Dr. Cédric Gobeil, for another installment of our Museo Egizio Museum and Research lecture series. Cédric specializes in the archaeology of daily life and New Kingdom material culture, with a primary focus on the community and settlement of Deir el-Medina. And it is this site, indeed, for which Cédric is one of the leading scholars, and we are very happy, indeed, that we have him here in Turin in this capacity. After having obtained his PhD at the Sorbonne University in Paris, Cédric worked as an archaeologist for the Institut Français d'Archéologie Orientale in Cairo, and also directed the French archaeological mission of Deir el-Medina. Later, he was appointed director of the Egypt Exploration Society in London, before assuming the role of curator at the Museo Egizio in 2019. Today, he will speak about one of his many fieldwork projects or activities in Egypt and Sudan. This project, focusing on the site called Habarab, is particularly exciting since it focuses on a settlement in the hinterlands of the well-known pharaonic foundations of the New Kingdom in Upper Nubia, and thus promises to shed important light on these local communities in between these centers of pharaonic power and administration. We are thus now very happy and looking forward to hearing your paper entitled The Third Cataract Project in Sudan, Archaeological Entanglement on the Nile Valley. Cédric, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Johannes, for this very nice introduction. Thank you. And good evening, everyone, or good morning for those watching from across the Atlantic, of course. So in February 2019, the Third Cataract Project has been launched under the auspices of the Egypt Exploration Society, and it now continues under the management of the Museo Egizio. The main goals of this archaeological mission in Sudan are to assess how the entanglement between the Nubian and Egyptian cultures has occurred in this part of the Nile Valley, and how the archaeological landscape has shaped its occupation. Preliminary results of this work in progress show that the situation is far more complex than it has been looked at first sight. Indeed, many archaeological evidence, such as settlements, burials, and workshops, indicate that this area was intensively used at a moment when a smaller channel of the Nile, nowadays dried, was active. So it all started from a discussion I had with Neil Spencer and David Edwards when I was working in London. And they wisely advised me to open a new concession on the Third Cataract in Sudan and to focus our primary work on a settlement named HBB 017, following Edwards' previous survey of the area, HBB for Habarab. It's the area of the city, the village of Habarab. So the first assessment made by Edwards was showing that it was an Egyptian New Kingdom site, but mixed with Nubian material culture. So based on this idea, the site was first thought to have been occupied sometime between 2500 BC and 1500 BC. So over a period of time of more than, I would say, 1,000 years. So why was it important to work on this particular site? First of all, so first, as you may read on the screen, the site is most unusual and very well preserved. So as it shows a mix of Egyptian pottery with Nubian architecture. So this is unique. There is no further similar site within the cataract zone. Second, this site had never been excavated before, so the archaeological contexts were absolutely and nicely preserved. So following this, the few questions, really three main questions, were initially orienting our work. And those were how the entanglement between the Nubian and Egyptian cultures occurred in this area. And secondly, how the archaeological landscape has shaped the occupation of the Third Cataract. And last, in this context, what were the precise nature and date of the settlement HBB 017? This had to be checked. So what we did, so we gathered a team of specialists to be ready as quickly as possible, and we were able to carry out our first mission in February 2019. Once on the spot, we also gathered a team of Sudanese to complete the team. So I must thank them all today, because all that you will see tonight or this morning has been made possible only thanks to their effort. So just to show you a few more people, so also part of the team, but missing on the previous picture were also the topographer and the ceramicist here to the left of the picture. So after having given this short context, I will now show you the place where we are working. So here's a view, very large view showing the position of the site compared to Egypt, its actual position. And if we zoom in, we now see our site along the Nile Valley, and then you see it being further north of Khartoum, but south of the Egyptian border. And still zooming in, we now have the map showing the Third Cataract area and the surroundings of our concession, located midway between Tombos and Nari, where the Egyptian presence is already attested, as you may see with these two pictures that you have on the map. Zooming in again, we now have the map showing our concession itself. So it is an area of 8 square kilometers, so it's very huge, it's vast area. So I do not have here to mention that for now, most of our concession is still yet to be explored. So now the site HBB 017 itself. So we were lucky, first of all, we were absolutely lucky enough to stay only 5 minutes away from the antique settlement. So there was a village, a modern village, just nearby. So it shows the continuity of use of this precise spot throughout the centuries. So I asked the Sudanese why they were still there, why they were living there nowadays. And they told me a very simple answer, that it was a very nice place to stay, as it was providing them with fertile lands for crops and for also for the the cows, and also that it offered them a plenty of fishes from the Nile, since this region with the cataract offered them almost natural places and spots to catch the fishes. Here now an aerial view of the settlement HBB 017. So as you see, it covers an area of approximately 8,000 square meters, and the location of the site is far from having been randomly chosen or selected. It is worth noting that the village has been built on a high plateau, circular plateau, overlooking the surroundings, and this will have its importance later during my presentation. Here's a few, just for the pleasure of the eyes, here's a few general views of the site HBB 017, once on the spot. So you see here and also there. So we see that the general elevation of the preserved walls is not too high. So despite this fact and the many collapses, we really can clearly detect a few sub-circular stone-built structures forming several clusters of features that are likely to be household units surrounded by small enclosure walls, but obviously not for a defensive purpose since they are very thin. To the east of this site, then of the village HBB 017, the site really overlooks a paleo channel, a sort of paleo channel where cultivations are nowadays being made by the local inhabitants. So this is where you see the green bushes in the far back. So I will also have the occasion to speak about this a little later during my presentation. So we began the work in the settlement by doing a surface survey, so by picking samples of diagnostic sherds and stones showing traces of debitage throughout the whole site, paying attention, of course, at where were the highest concentrations of small finds, which could indicate clearly a more intense occupation of a sector compared to another one. So we will come back on this topic later as well. Immediately after the surface survey, another task we had to carry before starting the excavation properly was to conduct the first ever topographic survey of the settlement. But before doing this, we had to implement a few topographic reference stations throughout the site. So our topographer Olivier was helped by the mission's members to carry out this task. So bearing in mind that any activity can be the subject of a training, this survey was also the occasion for us and for the younger members to learn the basic steps on how to perform a basic topographic survey. And rapidly, we obtained the first plan ever made of the settlement HBB017, and this is what you can see on the screen. So from what we saw on the spot and from this Google Earth view, the impression that the site is located on a circular plateau was confirmed. So also we could immediately see that a section of a general enclosure wall marking the limit of the village had been preserved, right there at the bottom right of the screen. But to verify this, our topographer and I did a section cut of the whole settlement. So this is the red line you see on the top of the screen. And we got another confirmation there that the settlement had been really installed on a natural plateau. So being close to the River Nile, this could have been done in order to protect the village from the annual flooding. And we will come back on this idea later. As I mentioned earlier, we had got the impression that the site was located on a circular plateau overlooking the area. But to confirm this, we did a cross-section, and it really confirmed, and this is what you see at the bottom of the screen. You really can clearly see that this settlement has really been located really at the highermost point of the area. Here's a closer view of the settlement, and within the settlement, as you may see, there are about 12 household units that can currently be identified, but there were maybe more hidden, there might be more hidden beneath the many collapses. And at first view, it is very difficult to assess the structures that represent actually something man-made from those that aren't part of any construction. But in total, we identified 16 areas of interest, and that will need to be explored in the future. And here's a good example of a household unit. This is the plan showing the area 11, in which you see 4 rooms that have been identified. So unfortunately, the plan is not yet finished. The specificity of this construction is that the rooms are fitted around a big rocky boulder that was most certainly offering natural protection against the wind, which can be very high, as we saw ourselves when we were there. And traces of gray ashes were found in one room, which could also indicate the presence of a fire pit. But we didn't have the time to excavate this unit very deeply, so it has been left for a future campaign. And here's another good example of a household unit we have been able to identify. It's Area 10. One interesting feature in this unit is that it has been itself built on a small individual rocky plateau, as shown by the section profile that you can see at the bottom of the screen, marked by the red line. And like what is happening with the whole settlement. So what was the purpose of such feature? Was that the house of a more prominent member of the village, or was it made as such to increase the protection of the content of the rooms? Well, we cannot know for sure but of course this question, like many others, will be central in the future campaigns. But for our first campaign, so in order to understand the stratigraphic preservation of the site, a single unit was chosen for further investigation, and it was known to us as Area 3. It's a small household unit that has been very easy to identify. So here's a picture of Area 3 before our excavation work. And here's now the plan of Area 3, which is a household unit, acquired thanks to topography and photogrammetry. So the unit covers an area of roughly 200 square meters and is divided into 5 different spaces, each of them having been partially excavated by a different team member. So the dark gray stones show the main unit, the main structure of the unit, while the brown ones are indicating rooms or other special features, while the light gray ones are the collapsed stones. Here's how we did proceed. So we divided each room in 2 halves, materialized here by the purple lines, in order to create a section in each room to easily follow the stratigraphy of each of these rooms. First of all, when looking at all the collapsed stones, we got the impression that they had been intentionally set up in small piles. It seemed that people came at some point after the abandonment of the unit, either to reoccupy the area or to reuse the stones, perhaps as a quarry. But this is something that would need to be further studied in order, of course, to be fully confirmed. Here are some pictures then of the team members starting their work in the rooms. So here's one member in room B. is another one in another room, room E. Another one that's in room D this time. And it's worth mentioning that our inspector, Amal, was very enthusiastic to help us, so she excavated along with us. So this is something that we are really fond and really, to be able to be working with our Sudanese colleague. So Amal is her name, and we really, really hope that we'll be able again to work with her in the future seasons and campaigns. Here's again two other Sudanese members of the team in room A. So now let's focus more inside each of these rooms. So in room A, we see a series of fire pits along the south walls, the one which is to the left of the screen, and a base made of stones. So we're maybe to support big pottery jars, since we see two circular emplacements of such things. Drawing and photogrammetry were made, so this is what you have on the screen. So the features in room A involved obviously storage and heating. Could it be a food preparation area? Again, we don't know for sure, but this is our current hypothesis. If we move now to room B, a particular context made of sand and ashes was found, and this context was containing a huge amount of animal bones, and especially fish bones. So could it mean that this room was used for storing food and or also perhaps as a place to dry meat? Again, this is our current hypothesis, but it will need further assessment. So from room B, we are going into room C. And there was surprisingly barely nothing in room C, only a few layers of loose sand mixed with very few ashes. So we found no tools, no special features at all. So could have it been a sort of bedroom? But we don't know, of course. This is, again, at the best of our current knowledge. So then obviously a further study of the few pottery sherds, the very few pottery sherds found, could maybe give us details about the function of this room. Here's room D. Based on the features found in this room, it looks like it was a workplace, or a room at least dedicated to food processing. We indeed found seats made of flat stones, all displayed in a semicircular pattern, many round stone pounders and grinders, and other smaller stone tools. There's also a fire pit there that could also have been used for cooking food. So this is by far one of the most interesting rooms that we had. And now the last room, room E. So beneath a layer of collapsed mud bricks, perhaps coming from the roof, we don't know, was a thick layer of soft sand mixed with ashes. It contained a significant quantity of bones, animal bones, and bivalve shells. So from these clues, our main hypothesis is that this room might have been used as a storeroom. But the fact that this room looks like an external annex built against the general wall of the household seems to support this idea. On this picture of room E again, so the last one we saw, we see the preserved elevation of the wall on more or less 1 meter. So this is the north wall of room E. And apart from being a nice surprise compared to our first impression that the walls of all units were not that very well preserved, this picture shows how the walls were made. So we clearly see that the big stones were logically set at the bottom, while the smaller ones were placed at higher levels. But unfortunately, apart from the few mud bricks found, we have found no traces of the ceiling and or the roof structure. So we do not know for now how they were made, and even if there was a roof or a ceiling at all. So we hope to find some clues in future campaigns. So now the small finds. So what we clearly see is that this slide, so regarding the small finds, that was absolutely interesting and came as a very nice surprise. So this slide is showing you what we call the minimum number of individuals regarding the pottery sherds, so the ceramic. The percentages show that the proportion of Egyptian early New Kingdom, so 18th dynasty, and Nubian classic Kerma pottery sherds by area. And from what our ceramicists understood, it is mostly an Egyptian assemblage, but highly mixed with a very rather high number of Nubian Kerma inclusions. So in almost every area of the site HBB017, there's also a lot of post-New Kingdom pottery sherds that would indicate a quite long occupation of the site. And it is interesting and very worthy to note that Area 2 contains almost exclusively Christian pottery sherds. So it is evidence of a later reoccupation of the site. So is it really an evidence of a later reoccupation of the site, or a continuing occupation of the site? Again, this were only samples. We worked there for only a few weeks, so further work will be absolutely necessary to answer all these questions, but they really are promising. And thanks to our small finds, all the findings, and what our ceramicist has been able to assess, the initial idea that the majority of the sherds were dating from the Egyptian New Kingdom must be balanced and nuanced. So while there are a high proportion of sherds from this period and material culture, the assemblage found shows a rather good proportion of indigenous pottery, as you see on the screen, thus making sense in regard of the Nubian architecture of the settlements, because as you may have seen, the architecture of the households are quite circular in shape and are not like purely Egyptian in style. And indeed, the whole set of pottery analyzed showed the exact same characteristic and followed the same datation. And we were lucky enough to find these almost complete, ceramic vases, again, to support the idea of the the high presence of Nubian ceramic among the Egyptian material culture and assemblage. But together with pottery sherds, we found an impressive quantity of lithics during our excavation, as well as during the initial surface survey carried on the entire village during the first days of our presence. And these are essentially stone tools and flints made and produced from stone debitage activity, many of which made from semi-precious stones like carnelian. And all these small finds will need to be further studied during future campaigns. But we also found traces of the Egyptian New Kingdom material culture in the shape of these beads. Of course, this is only a selection of those that were found during our work. And while we were not working on the site with our Sudanese workmen, and that was mostly in the afternoon, so we took the time during these afternoons to carry field walking surveys. These survey, as you have seen until now, so our concession is 8 square kilometers. We had to explore it to the fullest, even if we are far from having done it all. So, but thanks to these surveys, we found a few new sites that had been left unreferenced until then, and many burial sites. And we also got confirmation of 2 other occupation sites, and so settlements, and 1 workshop, or at least production area, with surface traces of many stone tools and flints. Here on the picture, our topographer and our ceramicist are surveying the surface, during one of our many field walking sessions. And these now on the screens, just to show you the before and after, the result of our work. So the sites you see on this map are the sites that had been already identified by David Edwards prior to our work, and that were known before our first and last campaign. And now here you see the situation has clearly evolved. So these are all the new sites that have been identified, or at least confirmed, thanks to our field walking survey. So you see in green you have the burial sites, in yellow are the graffiti or rock art places. Then in blue you would have the settlements, occupation site, and then in the pink the work places or workshop. And what traces we did find, just to ensure that this is far from being just an invention from our side. So here are some pictures of what we found during this survey. So the quantity of small finds is absolutely incredible. So on the picture you see the remains of most probably a workshop or a production area, now known as, we gave it a number. And based on the pottery analysis made by a ceramicist, this site seems to date from the Kerma period, but without more precision for now. Again, this will need to be further assessed. But as you see, again, many stone tools were also found, all laying down on the surface, really being just right there on the surface. And here on this picture, you see two good examples of burials in sites that we numbered HBB 030 and 031. So the burials always show a similar layout or pattern, and this is really something to highlight. So individuals obviously were buried at the foot of a big stone or a boulder, while smaller rocks were piled above a shallow pit dug in the ground. And unfortunately, most of them have been looted. Only a few that, again, during our field walking surveys, only a few have survived unviolated, unfortunately, but they will, of course, we hope to assess them and excavate them properly during the course of upcoming campaign. However, these burials could be further studied, we think, thanks to the pottery that we can find in and around them. So again, the ceramicist will be absolutely useful. And also, thanks to the numerous bone fragments that were left by the looters, as here, as you see in this two examples. So you have HBB 030 and again 31. So again, we will need to work closely with an osteologist and anthropologist in a coming season. Traces of occupation on the site HBB 033, possibly linked with mining activities, were also found, as you see here on the screen. So what we found, of course, the walls, stone walls, but also a huge quantity, a lot of pottery sherds, obviously a mix of New Kingdom and Kerma culture pottery sherds, again, to be assessed in the future. So everywhere we were walking, everywhere we were going, we could see the traces of occupation. So that was absolutely wonderful. Among the things that we found many stone walls running north-south, very strangely, all of them having been built on the top edges of the surrounding hills. They are interpreted as game traps or game drives, so these would be devices and features for hunting purposes. And note on the the pictures, the circular watch post at the top of the right picture, where hunters could hide while waiting. So what you need to see, there was a hunter waiting in the tower, hiding, and then people would run after animals, and then they would be afraid. They will all run in one direction, being guided like in a funnel shape with walls, and then at the end, hunters would then pop out and then just shoot them with bows and arrows. The satellite imagery, however, put a limit. So we identified a lot thanks to satellite imagery, but there's a limit clearly to identify these alignments of stones, because at some point they are mixed with other stone features. So we do intend to bring a drone in the coming season to get better images of our concession, and then to better map these stone walls and put them on the general map of our concession. Again, I mentioned earlier, our concession is an ideal place to study the archaeological landscape of the Third Cataract, thanks to the presence of a paleo channel. This fact, in fact, was confirmed by a previous assessment of the area made by Professor Macklin and his team, and among whom is Jamie Woodward, a professor of geography from the University of Manchester, whom I had the chance to meet when I was in the UK. And on these two pictures on the screen, we see the archaeological sites. So these are the pink dots, clearly indicating channel networks in the Third Cataract area during the Kerma and the medieval periods. And this is to evidence that the channels were there in the past. So there was, but unfortunately, there have been a channel network contraction. so they became dried. So when we were on the field, as well as thanks to Google Earth, we got the impression clearly that a paleo channel was probably active to the east of the current Nile River, where currently there are some green bushes that I showed you earlier. And if you look at the map now, this is the what we have been to create. This is what we got from our direct observation on the field. So these clearly indicate that there was a bigger island surrounded by two channels, well, another channel to the east at the time of the Kerma period, or during the Egyptian New Kingdom at least. And now, bearing this in mind, when we take the map of all the sites that we identified during the last work that we have done there, here's what we see. So we clearly see that the archaeological sites in our concession, so the settlements, production sites, workshop, are all located on both sides of the Paleo Channel, as well as the current Nile River, which was also active during the Kerma period. And also that the burial sites are also the green spots and areas are all located at the highest points on both sides of the Paleo Channel. In fact, in order to avoid, obviously, the annual flooding of the Nile. It's very logically. Now, in our concession, we are lucky to see many, to have many good examples of rock art and graffiti, especially on two sites. Sites HBB 011 and HBB 032. So these are sites with graffiti, so these are the one marked with the yellow spots on the map. It is very interesting to highlight the fact that both sites are located along the main branch of the Nile, or at least the actual Nile River at this very spot. So they were obviously made to be seen. So we have to imagine the Egyptians, for instance, among other people, Egyptians coming from the north, coming there. So these graffiti could be, could be used as benchmarks in the landscape to highlight that, this is where things happen. This is where you will have settlements. This is where maybe you will have storage. This is where you will have production sites, etc. This is also maybe where you can get food. So for any expeditions, just to mention that would arrive on this spot, that would indicate them, a clear mark that you need to land at this very place. And actually, we are exactly at the northern entrance, at the northern part, in the northern part of the Third Cataract, which will develop further south. So the hieratic graffiti, because there are some hieratic graffiti on the site noted as HBB 011, they were all published in 1979, but not all of them, so the figured one, have been identified. So we have been able and lucky enough to identify a few more, a bit more, but mostly figurative ones. So now we'll show you them a bit in more detail. If my computer wants to turn the slide, there you go. So these are the hieratic ones that have been previously published. All of them, that's what we noted, have been marked and inscribed by scribes. Obviously from the Ramesside period, thanks to the prosopography, thanks to the names. These are names that are attested during the Ramesside period. And again, what we have to assume is that these were made by scribes that were joining an Egyptian expedition. So again, it checks the boxes, it supports what we thought, that yes, these are spots that are made to be seen from the Nile Valley, from the Nile River, sorry. And again, something to highlight is that they are facing the Nile River. They are not hiding to the east, so they are, because now we are to the east of the Nile, so they are facing west, so they are facing the Nile, so they are absolutely not hidden. So they were clearly made to be seen by other people. So again, in the respect of Egyptians taking care of having a grasp on his landscape, this is also checking all the boxes. So this will all need to be further assessed. And of course, the search for new graffiti, it will continue absolutely. I was mentioning some figured graffiti, some rock art. Yes, we have. So then some graffiti rock arts were less obvious to see and to find. So this is why they were never mentioned before. We really were looking for them. And this is why on this image we have been using the software D-Stretch to enhance the pixels. Otherwise, the original picture, you might not have been able to see clearly the boat which is there, and obviously one of the boats that were used by an Egyptian expedition to come and then to disembark at this very spot on the Third Cataract. On this one, this is huge. It's one of the biggest stone in this area. Is really on the top of everything else. Is the highermost point. We can clearly see. Well, we can see, maybe not clearly, a few animals, among which are longhorn cows and giraffes that we can see. They are all mixed all together. This is, I would say, the classical iconography, classical imagery of the graffiti and rock arts that can be found in this region of Sudan. And again, these graffiti have never been mentioned in the publication of 1979 or in other publications. So again, this is something that will be published in the coming months or years. Again, but we need absolutely to go back on the spot. But also, thanks to our Sudanese workmen, they also helped us in facilitating greatly our work. And we have to thank them absolutely for that. So during one afternoon, one of our workmen came and knocked at our door and said, "Oh, I learned that you're looking, for some graffiti and rock arts." And we said, "Yes." So we said, "Oh, then come with me. I will show you one that I think no one has seen before." Well, yeah. Then we walked, and indeed we found a new graffiti or rock art, at least imagery that you can see, the one that you can see on the screen. And so never mentioned before, and then it shows a longhorn cow, sorry. And what is interesting is that this huge stone is located at the crossroad of two paths that are going, one from to the Nile and another one going to the desert. So again, maybe to in some way to indicate the correct path, or for some people, nomads, that this is the way if you want to bring your cattle close to the Nile to get some fresh crops or fresh water. This is the way to go. And indeed, the head of the cow is pointing towards the Nile. So maybe again, working on or serving as a benchmark for the landscape in the area. Again, we search many hours for some more, but we have not been able to find any at this point. But of course, in the near future, we are absolutely, we trust and we are confident that we will find many more. So again, tonight or this morning, I only wanted to show you, bits, examples of what we have been able to achieve during the course of 3 weeks and a half only in February 2019. Until then, so we just can hope and look for the future, for our future campaign, when we'll be able to resume our work. So in February 2019, when we went back to Khartoum at the end of the month with our head full of ideas for future campaign, we were absolutely enchanted. So because the concession, indeed, as promised by Neil Spencer and David Edwards, has indeed a very high archaeological potential. And we must absolutely go back there in order to complete our work, the work that we had barely started. So really, let's hope that the COVID situation, as well as the political situation in Sudan, will allow us to do so very quickly, after having been forced to postpone our next mission during the last 3 years, very unfortunately. So my colleagues at Museo Egizio are all looking forward to joining me next time. So with this note, I would like to thank you for your attention, and I'm absolutely open for any question of yours. Thank you.
The introduction into this landscape and also touching upon all those different kinds of evidence that are revealed by doing this kind of intensive survey work on the one hand, and the other on the intense, let's say, initial cleaning and working on the settlement side. So indeed, settlement places, burial places, ancient landscape transformation, thinking of paleo channels, markings in the landscape in form of rock inscriptions and rock art. So it's indeed a fascinating concession and area, which really, as you often said, you know, ticks in many boxes that open up so many questions and further research. So in terms of questions and further research, there is indeed one question from the audience, as I see. I read it loud. Thank you for this lecture, Cédric. Are you considering also to organize initiatives to involve the local community?
Thank you for the question. Just a moment, I'm going to close just a window. Thank you for the question. Indeed, so this was, and it still is, absolutely our wish. I mentioned how close we are with Sudanese, how we do like, and if not to say love, working with them. And what we have done with my colleagues at the ES when we were there in February 2019, and of course I thank them for all that they achieved with us back then, we managed to, you know, gather and invite the local community where we were living, in the village where we were living, to come for, you know, a friendly chat, a friendly discussion on the course of an evening, a very early evening, and then just, of course, to tell them what we were doing, to, of course, to say hi, obviously, but we were speaking to them on a daily basis. But really, we wanted to make sure to make something a bit more official, to clearly mark that we are not there close to you. We are there, you know, we're not close. I would say not on the side of you, but we are among you and we are with you. And I would say that the villagers replied very nicely, and they acknowledged very politely, and then they came, and then we started to chat, and then we explained what we're doing, and we're all laughing and having and they understood exactly what we're doing. And of course, and you know, because you've been working to the Sudan for many years. So at the end, we really bonded. And this led us to think that we had to do something more. It's not just when we are there, because we are there. Well, of course, last time it was 3 years ago, but I would say on a regular basis, if we were to do, you know, work in Sudan on an annual basis, we would only be there for a month and a half top. But what about the rest of the year? We need to be involved, you know, to involve them and to be in touch with them. And they need to be in touch with us and their heritage. So we had thought of maybe creating something more, I would say, official, as a visitor center, to create maybe even a program with schools to involve the children in the school, of course, because we all know that when you involve local communities, plural, this is the best way to ensure the survival of the heritage, the survival in their mind, but also physically, because people, well, we assume they will know that there's no treasure buried, you know. So it's their heritage, but they need to, you know, to take care of that. They, you know, you need to ensure, especially, I don't know if you saw that on my one of the first slides. This site is threatened by mining activities, modern mining activities. So maybe one day someone will say, "Oh, I'll go with the bulldozer there just to find gold." So again, just to make them aware of this historical significance, of the heritage significance of this site. So we absolutely, you know, want to develop something with the children, with the local villagers, because they almost literally live on the top of the village. So as I was saying, it's the permanence of the occupation. This is absolutely striking. So, and maybe not having someone on a yearly basis appointed as an official guard of the site. Again, that person would maybe feel more entrusted and involved, and could be used more almost as a spokesperson with the community. So these are all ideas, but of course we are absolutely looking forward to increase all the activities and all the engagement that we will do in the future with the local communities. We cannot work without them. Point. Yeah.
This sounds indeed exciting, and I only can emphasize this work with the local communities, also based on my not really personal involvement, but also in participating and seeing how wonderful colleagues of mine have engaged with local communities in the excavations that I participated in Sudan. Coming back a little bit to the, let's say, ancient evidence again, do you have an idea of, let's say, how many people might have lived in HBB 017, or what kind of, let's say, economy did they have? Were they, let's say, herders? Were they farmers? How do you, for the moment, let's say, how would you put them into this, let's say, social landscape in between also Tombos and Nauri and the other let's say, more pharaonic places of power? So what is your take on that? So
thank you for the question, man. You hit the bullseye. Absolutely, these are a central question. Absolutely. So first of all, we do not know for now if this was a permanent occupation or if it was a temporary occupation, when expedition, either Egyptian or Nubian expedition, could come in the area to process, for activities in touch with Nile flooding, or at a certain moment during the year when the Nile was low. Who knows? So maybe this occupation, this settlement, was only part-time occupied. Again, we don't know. And the fact that we have high concentration of pottery sherds, since they seem to have been, to have worked on a very long term, long occupation time, we don't know. It might be part-time, but over a very long period of time, or on a yearly basis, on a permanent basis, but very intensively. Again, we don't know. These are all questions absolutely that will need to be checked, and we hope that to assess this together with the burial site, with all the tombs that we have, the burials, try to be to have a broader picture, a more clearer picture of all this social community and what was happening. And one of the questions that you mentioned at the end, you asked a lot, but please tell me again if I missed a point, is that indeed it shed the light, and that was striking to me, it shed the light on the fact that it looks like Egyptians were living in peace with the Nubians, at least there in the village. So it's not obviously a Nubian village, it's not an Egyptian village, it's a place where both communities are there living together. Or maybe it's some part of the year for one and some part of the year for the other, we don't know. But obviously the Nubian architecture plus the Egyptian and Nubian material cultures all mixed together, all shed light on what I call the entanglement. I know some people would not like this term, but obviously it's not the idea that people are fighting and one is conquering the other. No, they really seem to be living peacefully. But please remind me if I answered all the questions.
You touched upon all the major issues, and I know that it's difficult to say also how many people were living there.
Oh yes, how many people, yes. As I mentioned, 12 household units, 16 areas. We don't know. And even if we look, yes, that's what I wanted to say, thank you. Even if I wanted to say we can have a rough idea, we will get at some point a rough idea of how many burials we have. Again, that would be on a very long period. And since we identified other settlements within the same area, who knows if these people come from these other settlements. Very difficult. But I think with the help of all all the fields, we will be able to get maybe at least a mere hypothesis at some point, but we do not have it for now. Yeah.
Thank you. There is indeed one more question also from the audience. Someone wants to know or wants to ask you if there were any building rules in place. So whether buildings were always built oriented towards the north or the south, depending on obviously the location of the settlement, the key settlement, but maybe this question is also a bit related to the walls, the dry stone walls that we found in the hinterland.
Absolutely. So first of all, the dry stone walls that we found in the hinterland, they are not occupation site. These are walls used to to orient the animals while the Sudan, the Nubians, the people there would hunt them. So they have no link, I would say, with the occupation properly. And the other ones we have in the hinterland, we saw, I showed you a couple of walls. They were walls of a work area, so either a workplace. So then, obviously, but again, that this is just from an initial survey. We do not know if people were living there. Maybe people could have lived on their work spot, maybe not, we don't know. But what is sure then, as I'm looking at the map again, it doesn't seem that if for instance the semicircular general shape of the enclosures were made to protect the inhabitant from the wind, for instance, all the entrances of these households would have been, pointing towards one direction, and it's not the case. They are randomly made. Again, maybe, well, it most probably served a purpose, but again, we do not see. One thing, though, I can tell you is that the fire pits, but this is happening in most of the settlements we are excavating, are always located close to a wall, so they are abutting a wall. Again, maybe in order to let the smoke evacuate. So maybe if there were any coverage, either ceiling or roof above these households, that could have been, of course, an opening offering like a chimney or chimney effect to have the smokes escape. But for the orientation of these households, no, unfortunately, it doesn't seem to follow a precise pattern. And again, I'm just having in mind the workmen's village in Amarna, in Deir el-Medina, where you really have, and in all the workmen's village we know now in Giza, as well as in Laoun, we have a very fixed pattern, very systematic. But now in this case, it's not the case. This is why it's very Nubian. It's round. It's almost organic in pattern. Yes.
Mm-hmm. I have a last question that I would like to put into the atmosphere, also in order to trying to understand the Nubian or Egyptian presence, let's say, from also the dimension of the material culture. Do you plan for the future also to include into all the research that will be done also natural scientific analyses, for instance, of the pottery sherds, in order to understand whether they are, let's say, locally produced, or whether this is ceramic fabric, let's say, proper Egyptian made? Is this something that is also on your future agenda for the future of the project? Since in working in Sudan, we have the wonderful ability also to export samples in order to do all these analytical methods.
Well, in your question, you had the answer. Yes, yes, of course. Yes. As you said, already our ceramicist, and on the spot, the ceramicist, well, he will come back, and maybe other ones will come back, because we are overwhelmed by the quantity of ceramic that we have. We will have the direct observation on the spot of all the the pottery sherds that we find. the entire jars and vases that we find as well. But of course, on the top of that, the capacity of being able to export these samples, these sherds, in Europe, well, outside the Sudan, and then to use modern technology to assess them, that will be used absolutely. And thanks to that, we will be able to do modern archaeology and very precisely acquire data from these ceramic assemblage. Absolutely, yes.
Wonderful. This is a very promising future. I hope that indeed in one of the next possible time slots, you and your team will be able to resume your work at in this area.
Thank you.
And I would also like to thank everyone who was watching online in the evening or in the morning, depending on where you were in the world. I also want to highlight these little images that Cédric put also on his thank you slide. So if you want to support the work of the Museo Egizio in all its different forms, then visit these websites here and you will get more.
Thank you very much.
Goodbye, everyone. And Cédric, thank you once more for your wonderful presentation about this.
Thank
project.
you. Thank you again. And goodbye. Thank you. Bye-bye.